Hi, Adam here, and welcome to week 2 of our virtual regatta top tips. Today we're going to be focusing on some mark rounding and downwind tips. In a change to last week, I'm not doing it in a race situation. I've just set up some scenarios with the help of my brother Johnny, who's kindly offered to come on and help set some different scenarios up today as we go around the race course. So just starting off at the upwind marks here. So we've rounded the windward mark and now we're heading across to the wing mark, the spreader mark. So in a race scenario, I'm now thinking about a few things. So obviously I'm thinking about my own boat position and trying to get the best possible mark rounding at the next mark. However, on top of that, I'm looking at this top left-hand corner, the circle, and looking at what's going on wind-wise down the course. So we can see there is a bit of pressure coming in on this side of the circle here and way out on the left-hand side as well, but that's probably not going to reach us till much further down the leg, if at all. So my initial thoughts would be to do an early jibe and try and get out to this pressure here because the increase in pressure is the biggest thing downwind, especially in the more performance boats, but you want to be in the wind as much as possible regardless of what direction it is, because you'll just get going downwind so much quicker. And it's also worth pointing out that something I forgot to mention last week is where you've got your speed in the right hand side here, so 6.1 knots. If you see the little green toggle there, that means you're currently accelerating, and if you see it go red, that means you're slowing down. So it's worth having a look at that as you're going along, because it can tell you if you're in a gust or not, and if you're sailing efficiently or not. Because if it's green, it means you're picking up the pace. So we'll just start the video there. Coming up to the wing mark, what I'm thinking about is when I need to press this blue button in the bottom right corner, because that launches our spinnaker. In these boats, it takes 2.5 seconds. So you kind of got to gauge when you are 2.5 seconds away from the mark, because you want the spinnaker to go up as you're going around the mark. If you put it up before, sometimes the boat bears away and you either hit or miss the mark. If you put it up too late, other boats are going to come past you with a bit more speed. So you want to try and time it for the spinnaker to pop just as you're going around this mark. In some of the other boats, it takes a little bit different amount of time. So the offshore racer, for example, takes about 5 seconds for it to launch. So you've got to press that button a little bit earlier again. So get to know the boat you're sailing in. So Johnny's pressed it a good time there as he's rounding, and my spinnaker's gone up there, so pretty good timing for both boats there. So the first scenario we're going to set up here is one that we saw right at the end of last week's clip. So it was where we were both on port. I went over the top of the boat that was ahead of me and then jibed almost into them and gave them a penalty. The crucial thing to note here is if you're both on port and the boat to windward jibes onto starboard and completes their jibe, if they then hit the port boat will get the penalty, regardless of if you feel there's been fair time and opportunity for that boat to get out of the way. In virtual sailing, if that jibe's completed, that port boat will get the penalty. So we'll just watch as this situation unfolds here. So Johnny jibes, I jibe straight away. It's worth noting I've got the wind indicator setting, the wind shadow setting on this race, just so you can see those lighter patches, so we can see how much it is affecting the other boat. So just carrying on there. So I've took Johnny's wind and I am rolling over the top of him pretty quickly. He starts to do a little bit of a luff, but it's not enough. I then jibe right in front of him and give him the penalty. So somewhat unfairly, it may seem, Johnny got a penalty there because he had no chance of getting out of the way. However, what we'll look at on the next downwind leg is what we can do in advance of that situation to try and avoid it happening. So just like in real life, in real sailing, we need to think about situations before they are right upon us, because sometimes it's too late to do something about it. And this is very much one of those situations. so we are now coming into the leeward mark, and there's a few things to think about now. There's about a third of the way down the leg to go. So I'm again looking at this circle in the top left corner. In particular, I'm paying attention to the two yellow marks, the bottom marks, and I'm always going to go around the one that's further upwind. So in this case, it's the one on the left-hand side of the screen as we're looking at it. It's further upwind, it's closer to the next mark. It's by far the preferential mark to go around in this situation. However, what I'm also looking for is which way I want to go up the beat. And that's being dictated to me by the wind pressure. So you can see there is some right out on the left-hand side here. However, I'm not sure I'm going to go that far. So there is a darker patch on the right-hand side. At the minute, that's more appealing to me. So if I was in a race situation, I'd probably go around this left-hand mark, but then tack and get out into the bigger pressure on the right-hand side. But all the time, bearing in mind that this left-hand side may develop or it may just pass by. So that's the thought process. Again, about a third of the way to go, which should, again, in your real normal sailing, it's kind of what you should be thinking about as well. Don't get to the mark and think, where am I going to go up this beat? How am I going to round the mark? Think in advance what you're going to do up the next beat. So when you get to a mark, you should already know your plan of action for that next leg. So as we approach this mark, we're going to see an interesting situation develop. So Johnny's coming in on starboard, I am coming in on port. However, I am going to be the inside boat. So as we enter the 3 boat length circle here, it's not 3 boat lengths in the game, but in real life it would be a bigger circle. But as we enter the mark room circle, what we need to consider is who has right of way. So in the normal rules of sailing, the boat that's overlapped on the inside would have right of way, so that would be me. So in normal sailing, I'd be able to jibe inside Johnny here and get around the mark. However, in the virtual rules of sailing, the starboard boat has priority. So in this situation, you're going to see I'm going to jibe inside Johnny. However, we're going to make contact, and because he's on starboard, I'm going to get the penalty. So here we come, I'm jibing inside boat, but I've got the penalty, and Johnny's got round a nice mark round in there and managed to get round without the penalty. So the key thing to take away from this coming into a leeward mark is before you get to the mark, think about your approach and try and avoid coming in on the port ley line. Try and come in on starboard where possible. If you are coming in on port, duck behind those starboard boats, don't try and get inside them, because you will pick up the penalty as they head up close hauled again. The other thing just to take note of is, like in normal mark roundings on the water, in wide, out tight in the virtual world is the same as the real world. That's the best way of getting around the mark. Try and do a wide into it so you can head up and come really tight out of the mark, but just being careful that you don't clip that mark, because again you'll get a penalty. So we're just about to do the next downwind leg. So we're just setting up for the next downwind leg here. What it's worth noting is, again, look at the pressure downwind before you head on a downwind leg, and try and make sure you're heading for that on the downwind leg, because usually the person that gets to the wind first is the person that comes out on top by the time you get to the bottom mark. Again, in this situation here, there is some pressure on the far side here. However, I'm not convinced I'd get to that in time. There's a lot more pressure on this side of the circle. So what I'd be doing in a race situation here is jibing straight away, getting my kite up and firing off to that side of the course to try and get into this pressure, and hope that this didn't develop too much on this side. However, as we discussed last time, what we are going to look at here is the different scenarios you can do if you've got a boat just behind you to avoid falling victim to that sort of trap we discussed at the start of the last downwind leg. So to avoid a boat rolling over the top of you on port and then pulling a jibe on you and giving you a penalty, you've got 2 options at this mark. So as you round the top mark, if you're concerned about boats close behind you, one thing you can do is just jibe away straight away. So jibe onto port straight away. What that'll allow you to do is be the highest boat up, so there won't be boats on top of you to roll over the top of you if you do that instant jibe, and then you can jibe back onto starboard at a time that's convenient to you and when you've got clear air from the boats behind you. However, if you're wanting to get out to the other side of the course, so carry on starboard, we'll just run through the options that I like to put to play here. So I've just gone to the overview section and we can see, so it's actually really nice to show the wind shadow here. So you can see the wind shadow coming off Johnny's boat and the wind shadow coming off my boat. I'm already in a little bit of Johnny's wind shadow here. The danger is if I jibe now, Johnny will jibe on top of me and then he'll do the exact same thing that I did to him on the last downwind leg. So what I'll actually allow him to do here is slowly roll over the top of me. So we're both on starboard, both heading off to that side of the course, and as Johnny gets almost alongside me, I'm going to jibe. And what that means is Johnny's jibing behind me, not to windward of me, so he's not got the same options now for taking my breeze, because in order for him to do that, he'd have to head up really high and sail way out of his course to even try and take my breeze. So the final situation we're going to look at here today is just one of a windward boat situation. So normally if a boat is rolling over the top of you, if you luff them up, they'll get a penalty if you touch. However, just wanted to go through this one with you just so you didn't fall into thinking you had the rights here. So I'm overtaking Johnny. He might be to windward of me, but I've picked up the penalty there. So what happened was Johnny was ahead of me. He jibed in front of me. I then luffed him up, but I don't have rights to do so. And this is exactly the same as real life. If you are overtaking a boat, but you're coming underneath them, you've got to sail your proper course. You can't luff them up and make contact with them, otherwise you'll get the penalty. So it's just worth being aware of that. If a boat jibes in front of you and you sail underneath them, you will not have luffing rights to touch them. You'll have to keep clear of them. If it was the other way round and you were getting rolled by somebody that was coming from behind you, you could luff them, but you can't do the luffing if you're coming from behind. Hope that makes sense. Just a few things then, just to summarise from today. So at the start, before you come downwind, when you're doing that little hitch leg, have a look at the top left corner and consider the pressure down the course. On the downwind legs, it's the most important is to be where the wind is. So really look at that screen and make sure you're heading out to the side of the course that has got the most wind. And you need to be thinking about that before you get to that wing mark. On the downwind, think about when you're launching your kite. Try and get it to pop just as you're rounding the mark, not before, not after, to give you the best acceleration away from the mark. And then on the downwind leg, try not to fall into that trap of having a boat roll over the top of you on port and then jibe onto starboard and give you a penalty. So the two options I'd recommend is either jibing straight away onto port at the top to avoid any boats being above you, or carrying on starboard and actually letting any boats right behind you get almost over the top of you and then jibe over so they're in your wake, so to speak. Coming into the leeward mark, think about the rules coming in. So unlike in real sailing, the inside boat doesn't always have right of way. If it's coming in on port and you're on starboard, that boat is going to get the penalty. Likewise, if you're on port trying to go inside everybody, jibe round, you're going to get the penalty. So the key learning there is try and think about the mark rounding with about a third of the way to go and try and set yourself up so you're approaching the mark on starboard. Also, with about a third of the way to go, have a look at that top left hand corner, decide which mark you want to go around and which way up the beat you want to go, the upwind leg. That will depend largely on where the pressure is. Again, like we discussed last week on the upwind leg, you want to stay in the pressure. So those are just a few tips from me this week, and hopefully you'll tune in for more next week. Happy sailing and speak to you soon. Cheers guys.